Hi, boys and girls. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Mrs. Foistel, and we are on day 2 of Number the Stars. Absolutely love this book, and I'm so excited to be working with you. So our goal today is to keep track of the story elements, and in particular, the who and the characters that were introduced early on. You will need your reader's notebook and a pencil today because we will be taking some notes. Good readers check for meaning. So when we think about checking for meaning, we're always thinking about the who, what, where, when, and why. So as we read, we want, if we catch ourselves kind of drifting off, or maybe we read and we're like, whoa, what did I just read? You have to stop as a good reader and go back and reread and think about what's happening in the book. And one of the ways we can do this is thinking about the characters. So who are the characters in this book? What do you notice about these characters? How do they interact? How do they influence each other? And how do they change from the beginning of the story to the end of the story? So today, boys and girls, what I want you to do is I'm going to reread chapter 1, and I believe Mrs. Lindbergh read this chapter to you yesterday. And I'm going to read it, but we're really going to look at the characters in a story. So what I'd like you to do is, if you have your reader's notebook handy, I want you to create a page that looks like this. All right? So it can be just something very simple. So Number the Stars, character notes, and then Anne-Marie, Ellen, Kirsty, Mrs. Johansson, and Mrs. Rosen. Those are the people in particular that we're really going to focus on today. And I want you to take notes about each character and be prepared to add character names and notes to your list. So we're not just going to stop here. We're going to continue to build on this, come back and add to these notes that we've taken about these characters, add new characters, etc. Now, sometimes you can also sketch pictures to help you think about characters more deeply, and that's kind of fun too. So pause your video here and go ahead and set up a page similar to this and be ready to take some notes. Hopefully you had some time to get your page ready and you're ready to listen again to chapter 1 and write down what you notice about Anne-Marie, Ellen, Kirsty, Mrs. Johansson, and Mrs. Rosen. And if there is another character that might not be on this list, you can feel free to add that too. Why are you running? I'll race you to the corner, Ellen. Anne-Marie adjusted the thick leather pack on her back so that her school books balanced evenly. Ready? She looked at her best friend. Ellen made a face. No, she said, laughing. You know I can't beat you. My legs aren't as long. Can't we just walk like civilized people? She was a stocky 10-year-old girl, unlike lanky Anne-Marie. We have to practice for the athletic meet on Friday. I know I'm going to win the girls' race. I know I'm going to win the girls' race this week. I was second last week, but I've been practicing every day. Come on, Ellen, Anne-Marie pleaded, eyeing the distance to the next corner of the Copenhagen street. Please. Ellen hesitated, and then she nodded and shifted her own rucksack of books against her shoulders. Oh, all right. Ready, she said. I'm going to pause there for a second because it was just 3 paragraphs and we've learned a lot about 2 characters in particular. You have Anne-Marie, who is athletic and is getting ready for a race, and then you have her best friend Ellen, who is they say she was a stocky 10-year-old girl, unlike lanky Anne-Marie. So Anne-Marie is lanky. She's a 10-year-old girl. They're both 10 years old, and they're best friends. Go! Shouted Anne-Marie. And the 2 girls were off, racing along the residential sidewalk. Anne-Marie's silvery blonde hair flew behind her, and Ellen's dark pigtails bounced against her shoulders. There's something else you might want to write down. So if you need to, boys and girls, pause the video and jot down some of the things you've learned about both Anne-Marie and Ellen at this time. Wait for me, wailed little Kirsty, left behind, but the two older girls weren't listening. Anne-Marie outdistanced her friend quickly, even though one of her shoes came untied as she sped along the street called Østerbrogade, past the small shops and cafes of her neighborhood here in northeast Copenhagen. Laughing, she skirted an elderly lady in black who carried a shopping bag made of string. A young woman pushing a baby in a carriage moved aside to make way. The corner was just ahead. Anne-Marie looked up, panting as she reached the corner. Her laughter stopped. Her heart seemed to skip a beat. "Halt!" the soldier ordered in a stern voice. The German word was as familiar as it was frightening. Anne-Marie had heard it often enough before, but it had never been directed at her until now. Behind her, Ellen also slowed and stopped. Far back, little Kirsty was plodding along, her face in a pout because the girls hadn't waited for her. Anne-Marie stared up. There were two of them. That meant two helmets, two sets of cold eyes glaring at her, and four tall, shiny boots planted firmly on the sidewalk, blocking her path to home. And it meant two rifles gripped in the hands of the soldiers. She stared at the rifles first, then finally she looked into the face of the soldier who had ordered her to halt. "Why are you running?" the harsh voice asked. His Danish was very poor. 3 years, Anne-Marie thought with contempt. 3 years they've been in our country, and still they can't speak our language. "I was racing with my friend," she answered politely. "We have races at school every Friday, and I want to do well, so I—" Her voice trailed away, the sentence unfinished. "Don't talk so much," she told herself. "Just answer them. That's all." She glanced back. Ellen was motionless on the sidewalk, a few yards behind her. Farther back, Kirsty was still sulking and walking away toward the corner. Nearby, a woman had come to the doorway of a shop and was standing silently, watching. One of the soldiers, the taller one, moved toward her. Anne-Marie recognized him as the one she and Ellen always called in whispers the Giraffe, because of his height and the long neck that extended from his stiff collar. He and his partner were always on this corner. He prodded the corner of her backpack with the stock of his rifle. Anne-Marie trembled. "What is in here?" he asked loudly, and from the corner of her eye she saw the shopkeeper move quietly back into the shadows of the doorway, out of sight. "School books," she answered truthfully. "Are you a good student?" the soldier asked. He seemed to be sneering. "Yes." "What is your name?" "Anne-Marie Johansen." "Your friend, is she a good student too?" He was looking beyond her at Ellen, who hadn't moved. Anne-Marie looked back too and saw that Ellen's face, usually rosy-cheeked, was pale, and her dark eyes were wide. She nodded at the soldier. "Better than me," she said. "What is her name?" "Ellen." "And who is this?" he asked, looking to Anne-Marie's side. Kirsty had appeared there suddenly, scowling at everyone. "My little sister." She reached down for Kirsty's hand, but Kirsty, always stubborn, refused it and put her hands on her hips defiantly. Boys and girls, I wonder if we shouldn't, under Kirsty, write down younger sister to Anne-Marie and then stubborn, okay? The soldiers reached down and stroked her little sister's short, tangled curls. "Stand still, Kirsty," Anne-Marie ordered silently, praying that somehow the obstinate 5-year-old would receive the message. Aha, so Kirsty is 5 years old. Anne-Marie and Ellen are both 10. Oh, and I know some 5-year-olds, and I remember my children as 5-year-olds. And yes, they can be obstinate or stubborn, same thing. So if you need to, boys and girls, again, I remind you, just stop the video and catch up on some notes if you need to. But Kirsty reached up and pushed the soldier's hand away. "Don't!" she said loudly. Both soldiers began to laugh. They spoke to each other in rapid German that Anne-Marie couldn't understand. "Ha! She is pretty, like my own little girl," the tall one said in a more pleasant voice. Anne-Marie tried to smile politely. "Go home, all of you. Go study your school books, and don't run. You look like hoodlums when you run." The two soldiers turned away. Quickly Anne-Marie reached down again and grabbed her sister's hand before Kirsty could resist. Hurrying the little girl along, she rounded the corner, and in a moment Ellen was beside her. They walked quickly, not speaking, with Kirsty between them, toward the large apartment building where both families lived. When they were almost home, Ellen whispered suddenly, "I was so scared." "Me too," Anne-Marie whispered back. As they turned to enter their building, both girls looked straight ahead toward the door. They did it purposely, so that they would not catch the eyes or the attention of two more soldiers who stood with their guns on this corner as well. Kirsty scurried ahead of them through the door, chattering about the pictures she was bringing home from kindergarten to show Mama. For Kirsty, the soldiers were simply a part of the landscape, something that had always been there on every corner, as unimportant as lampposts throughout her remembered life. "Are you going to tell your mother?" Ellen asked Anne-Marie as they trudged together up the stairs. "I'm not. My mother would be upset." "No, I won't either. Mama would probably scold me for running on the street." She said goodbye to Ellen on the second floor where Ellen lived, and continued on to the third floor, practicing in her mind a cheerful greeting for her mother, a smile, a description of today's spelling test in which she had done well. But it was too late. Kirsty had gotten there first. "And he poked Anne-Marie's book bag with his gun, and he grabbed my hair." Kirsty was chattering as she took off her sweater in the center of the apartment living room. "But I wasn't scared. Anne-Marie was, and Ellen too, but not me." Mrs. Johansen rose quickly from the chair by the window where she had been sitting. Mrs. Rosen, Ellen's mother, was there too, in the opposite chair. They had been having coffee together, as they did many afternoons. Of course it wasn't really coffee, though the mothers still called it that, having coffee. There had been no real coffee in Copenhagen since the beginning of the Nazi occupation. Not even any real tea. The mothers sipped at hot water flavored with herbs. "Anne-Marie, what happened? What is Kirsty talking about?" her mother asked anxiously. "Where's Ellen?" Mrs. Rosen had a frightened look. "Ellen's in your apartment. She didn't realize you were here. Don't worry. It wasn't anything. It was the two soldiers who stand on the corner of Osterbrogade. You've seen them. You know, the tall one with the long neck. The one who looks like a silly giraffe." She told her mother and Mrs. Rosen of the incident, trying to make it sound humorous and unimportant. But their uneasy looks didn't change. "I slapped his hand and shouted at him," Kirsty announced importantly. "No, she didn't, Mama," Anne-Marie reassured her mother. "She's exaggerating, as she always does." Mrs. Johansen moved to the window and looked down to the street below. The Copenhagen neighborhood was quiet. It looked the same as always, people coming and going from the shops, children at play, the soldiers on the corner. She spoke in a low voice to Ellen's mother. They must be edgy because of the latest resistance incidents. "Did you read in Die Freie Dansk about the bombings in Hillerød and Nordborough?" Although she pretended to be absorbed in unpacking her school books, Anne-Marie listened, and she knew what her mother was referring to. Die Freie Dansk, the Free Danes, was an illegal newspaper. Peter Nielsen brought it to them occasionally, carefully folded and hidden among ordinary books and papers. And Mama always burned it after she and Papa had read it. Now, boys and girls, there's a character that I didn't include on our list that we might want to. Peter Nielsen, and he's bringing an illegal newspaper to Anne-Marie's parents, and it's always hidden when he brings it. But Anne-Marie heard Mama and Papa talk sometimes at night about the news they received that way, news of sabotage against the Nazis, bombs hidden and exploded in the factories that produced war materials, and industrial railroad lines damaged so that the goods couldn't be transported. And she knew what resistance meant. Papa had explained, when she overheard the word and asked. The resistance fighters were Danish people. No one knew who, because they were very secret, who were determined to bring harm to the Nazis however they could. They damaged the German trucks and cars and bombed their factories. They were very brave, and sometimes they were caught and killed. I must go and speak to Ellen, Mrs. Rosen said, moving toward the door. You girls walk a different way to school tomorrow. Promise me, Anne-Marie. And Ellen will promise too. We will, Mrs. Rosen, but what does it matter? There are German soldiers on every corner. They will remember your faces, Mrs. Rosen said, turning in the doorway to the hall. It is important to be one of the crowd, always. Be one of many. Be sure that they never have a reason to remember your face. She disappeared into the hall and closed the door behind her. He'll remember my face, Mama, Kirsty announced happily, because he said I look like his little girl. He said I was pretty. If he has such a pretty little girl, why doesn't he go back to her like a good father? Mrs. Johansson murmured, stroking Kirsty's cheek. Why doesn't he go back to his own country? Mama, is there anything to eat? Anne-Marie asked, hoping to take her mother's mind away from the soldiers. Take some bread and give a piece to your sister. With butter? Kirsty asked hopefully. No butter, her mother replied. You know that. Kirsty sighed as Anne-Marie went to the bread box in the kitchen. I wish I could have a cupcake. A big yellow cupcake with pink frosting. Her mother laughed. For a little girl, you have a long memory, she told Kirsty. There hasn't been any butter or sugar for cupcakes for a long time. A year at least. When will there be cupcakes again? When the war ends, Mrs. Johansson said. She glanced through the window down to the street corner where the soldiers stood, their faces impassive beneath the metal helmets. When the soldiers leave. Thank you, boys and girls. You did a fantastic job listening to that reading of Chapter 1. And hopefully you were able to pause the video and then take some notes on these characters and maybe add a couple more. I noticed that we were introduced to Peter Nielsen, and so I would probably add that to the note and maybe write down just a little bit. Not a lot. We don't know a lot about Peter yet, but I'm sure we will get to know him. Papa was introduced. That was Anne-Marie's father. So we could add both of those to the list. All right, so I'm just going to share what I had written down, some notes, and then it'd be interesting to see how many of your notes matched mine. So Anne-Marie Johansson, athletic, 10 years old, tall, blonde hair, has a younger sister named Kirsty, and stopped by soldiers for running in the street. Remember, when you're taking notes too, it doesn't have to be in complete sentences. It can be quick, brief, and just enough so that you know what you're talking about. And always when we're taking notes, you want to make sure that they're neat so that when you go back and reread, you can actually read the notes. Ellen Rosen is Anne-Marie's best friend. I would add that too. These two are best friends. Doesn't like to run. 10 years old, short, stocky, dark hair. Stayed back, scared when the soldier stopped Anne-Marie in the street. So again, I would probably add these two are best friends. Kirsty is Anne-Marie's younger sister. She's definitely very spunky. And I would add, wasn't stubborn. Spunky and stubborn. Wasn't afraid of the soldier at all when they were stopped. And wants cupcakes and butter. And which they haven't had butter or cupcakes for a long time. And we'll find out why, I think, later on. Mrs. Johansson, I put Anne-Marie and Kirsty's mom, Mrs. Rosen's friend, and Mrs. Rosen is Ellen's mom, very worried, told girls to be one of the crowd. So even just jotting those down and reading them to you, I'm noticing that there are a couple of things that I would add, and I'll probably, after this video, go back and add them as well. So if you need more time, pause the video here, and then copy these notes and add some of the things that I forgot, like Ellen and Anne-Marie being best friends, Kirsty being obstinate or stubborn. And maybe, oh, adding Peter Nielsen and the secret newspaper that he brings to the Johansons. So many things to add. And that was in one chapter, boys and girls. All that information in one chapter. Okay. So we're going to stop there. This is actually for tomorrow's lesson. So I'm going to go back. And, okay, boys and girls, you did a fantastic job today. Thank you so much. And hopefully you were able to understand the who and how important it is that we keep track of that story element as we read. So that was today's target. Here's what I'd like you to do at home. As you read your historical fiction book, pay attention to the story elements. Think about the who, what, when, where, and why. Take notes and don't hesitate to stop and reread if you don't understand what is happening in the story. After all, that is what good readers do. Thank you, boys and girls. I appreciate your time. Thank you for your hard work, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.